for giving us the strength to get through this last 9 years and to stay positive always, no matter what. And a lot of that is because of him. So on behalf of my family, my brother, my sister, an aunt, an uncle, his friends, we just want him to come home.
And there you have it, 48-year-old Arnell Simpson, O.J. Simpson's daughter, the only family member who testified there at the parole hearing. Again, to be fair, only one family member was allowed, so it was Arnell Simpson. Christopher Darden is rejoining us as well. Darden, of course, co-lead team prosecuting O.J. Simpson back in the mid-'90s for that double murder. Chris, as you heard O.J. Simpson there and you listened to his responses, the questions from the panel members, what were your impressions?
Well, it's classic O.J. Simpson, not taking complete responsibility for his own conduct. It's Mr. Riccio's fault that this happened. It's the fault of the guy who showed O.J. that he was armed and had a concealed weapons permit. It's his fault that a gun, was brought into that room. When, of course, we all know that it's O.J. Simpson who brought those people there, for an express purpose. So, I see O.J. not taking responsibility still. Not today for the robbery, kidnapping, and not for the murders many years ago. Now, I got to tell you, I'm really, a little perturbed that he is allowed to sit there and say how he has lived a model life, how he has never drawn a weapon on anyone, and how there's no one in existence who would ever say that he drew a weapon on them. And of course, we know that's a complete lie. And yet he's allowed to sit there in line with the impunity in this parole hearing.
Well, Christopher, to be fair, I mean,
I'm being fair.
I do want to play, this is just a clip, and this will probably be a clip that gets a fair amount of play over the next 24 hours. It's about, I'd say, 15 minutes into the hearing, and this is the O.J. Simpson that, again, you and members of your legal team spent a fair amount of time showing or trying to show jurors back in the mid-'90s. Here it is.
It's been ruled legally by the state of California that it was my property.
How much did that surprise you, seeing that, O.J.?
Well, you know what? Whether it's your property or not, there's a rule at common law that allows you to retrieve your property, but it doesn't allow you to retrieve it at gunpoint or by force. It doesn't allow you to restrict folks' movement or scare the living hell, out of people at gunpoint. It is what it is. He served 9 years. Perhaps that's all he'll serve. I'm not here to be vindictive or to be mean or to be mean-spirited, quite frankly. I mean, I do support the victims. I am an advocate for the victims, and not, Kim Goldman, but for Ron Goldman and for Nicole Brown. So, as I sit here today watching O.J., just tell little lies after lie, I can't help but think about the victims. And I appreciate all the people watching you and watching me today who remember the victims, who support the victims. I think in this country these days, we pay homage to the murderer and forget about the murdered. This is a farce.
You're bothered by the celebrity, the infamy of O.J. Simpson.
I am bothered by the notion that they say they cannot consider what happened in Los Angeles in 1994 on the one hand, but on the other hand, it gets a lie. I never pulled a weapon on anyone. I've always been a good guy on the street. Really? I mean, we all heard Nicole's 911 calls. We saw those photographs. We read her diary. We know what happened on Bundy. I mean, come on. I mean, what's the point of this thing if the evidence presented at the hearing is just simply a bald-faced lie?
Christopher Darden, prosecutor. Christopher, if you can, do stand by as we wait for this parole board to come back with some sort of decision. I want to bring in Carl Douglas now, a member of that so-called dream team who represented Simpson during his 1995 murder trial. Carl, as you heard your former client there testify, take questions, is it what you were expecting to hear from Simpson, or were you at all surprised by anything?
You know, Craig, that probably was the O.J. that I remember. He certainly is and has always been a zealous advocate. He has a certain perspective on what happened in Las Vegas. But I think the most important thing for everyone to remember, and something that the commissioner said early on, is this is not about what happened in Los Angeles, and this is not about the civil case. That's really difficult for many to understand and to appreciate, but he is being viewed and judged based on an objective set of criteria and making a determination of whether or not he is a suitable candidate for release. Certainly, I'm sure my good friend Chris Darden would concede that a 9-year to 33-year sentence for what he was charged with in Las Vegas is clearly excessive.
I don't know if Chris Darden would. Chris, do you?
Carl, how are you?
I'm doing well, my friend. Good seeing you.
Good to see you. Well, you know, as Carl knows, you know, in California, we have a penal code section called 209B, which is kidnapping for robbery. And we know in California he could get a lot more time than 9 years on a kidnapping charge. And everybody talks about this being a robbery. It's not just a robbery. It's also a kidnapping. He was convicted of kidnapping. And as I said before, I understand he did 9 years, and if it was a straight robbery where no one is armed and things are taken, you know, 9 years might be excessive. But, you know, here people are lined up against the wall. I know Carl probably remembers, as I do, the Bob's Big Boy massacre many years ago on La Cienega Boulevard in Los Angeles, where robbers went in and lined up people in the cooler, and people were executed. I mean, it's a very dangerous situation, and victims are very vulnerable in situations like that. I just think that, you know, you can't unring the bell. I think we all agree with that. You can't unring the bell. You know, the commission knows, most of the public knows. I just wish O.J. would just focus on the robbery. You know, don't make these, you know, wide-ranging statements about being such a great guy on the street and never drawing a weapon, because I think that when you do that, you do drag into the process, or at least into the minds of the commissioners, of what happened in Los Angeles. You know, stick to the issue.
Gentlemen, while we've been having this conversation, the word from Nevada that a decision is going to come down in less than 4 minutes. 4 minutes from now, we're told that the panelists have reached their decision. They'll come back and share it with us in just a few moments. I want to bring in Yale Galanter now. Yale Galanter is an attorney who represented O.J. Simpson, represented him in that Nevada robbery case. He joins me now from Aspen, Colorado. Yale, it seemed as if a fair amount of the hearing today was devoted to a tick-tock of the robbery that night, essentially retrying a case that had already been decided. Is that what you heard?
Yeah, I mean, I heard it. I thought that O.J. Simpson was classic O.J. Simpson. I thought that Bruce Vermong and Arnell were very powerful witnesses for him. I believe that this board in 3 or 4 minutes is going to come back and grant him parole. But yeah, I agree with you. It really was a tick-tock of what went down in that Palace Station hotel room.
This is a live look now. Orenthal James Simpson has been brought back into that hearing room there in Lovelock, Nevada. And again, Nevada, for those of you just joining us, Simpson is appearing via video conference. He's not in the same room as these parole board members. These parole board members are in Carson City, just outside Carson City. Simpson set to once again learn his fate. He seems to be, again, this is just reading body language, facial expressions here. He looks fairly confident, would you say, Ari?
He does. He has looked, his demeanor, we're looking at this live shot in Lovelock, O.J., as you mentioned, Craig, awaiting this decision that will determine whether he goes free in October or spends many more years incarcerated. He seems to have an easy demeanor. You see it now with him chatting with someone outside of the view of the camera. You see it in his interactions with the witness, with his lawyer.
Yeah.
He may be upbeat because he went through the parole hearing before and feels that he's got a good wind at his back.
For those of us, for those of you listening or watching who might not necessarily be up to speed on precisely how we got here, Simpson, of course, sentenced to 33 years in prison after being convicted back in 2008 of kidnapping, armed robbery, and other charges, all related to a 2007 memorabilia robbery at this Las Vegas hotel. This was a hotel far off the Strip, probably not a hotel that O.J. Simpson pre-1994 would have ever been caught dead in. But by all accounts, he has been, objectively speaking, a model prisoner there at Lovelock. We've heard some testimony about the courses that he's taken, commissioner of the softball league. There was, Katie, a bit of an odd moment where it appeared as if at his 2013 hearing, he pledged to take these AA classes, and then we heard last hour that I guess his agenda in prison was too full to make the AA meetings.
I got too much time on my hand, but I can't go to the AA meetings that I pledged to do, and that's important because the commissioner who asked him that question today is the same commissioner who asked him that question back in 2013. That's a broken promise, and the alcoholism or the alcohol or substance abuse issues is a factor that the commissioners will consider. And I want to emphasize something, Craig. It's not just the risk of violence that John is talking about, it's the risk of recidivism. Will he go out and exercise poor judgment? It's not will he go out and be violent. Will he go out and commit another crime?
But isn't there a correlation typically between one's age and recidivism? The older a person is, the less likely they are to commit another crime?
I would not disagree with that statement. However, you know, his age does help him at this point in time, but frankly, you could be 70 and still go out and commit a crime. I've prosecuted people 70 and older, so it doesn't mean that you're precluded from committing a crime, and it doesn't mean it has to be a crime of violence, and that is what the commissioners are thinking about when they're considering letting him out today.
Bill Roden, again, Bill Roden with us here, writer at large for ESPN's The Undefeated, actually working on an article right now. Bill, if it's
coming, multitasking.
It's coming, I promise.
If his editors are watching or listening,
it's coming.
Bill, if you had to guess about, assuming he does get parole here, and again, that seems to be still what most folks suspect will happen. If he does get parole, where are we going to see O.J. Simpson over these next few years? Is it going to be, are we going to see him on golf courses? Is he going to become a reclusive creature?
No, not reclusive. This is probably poor Joe. Bit parts Orange is the New Black. You know, I mean,
you think he's going to start acting again?
Well, here's the thing. I think that O.J.'s got a lot of options, and particularly in this climate of showmanship and business where money in our society now has become the highest value.
Yeah.
As I said before, O.J. has always been a money maker, for whether it's for Hertz or Polo or whatever. I think there are a lot of people who are seeing him now, seeing he's still vibrant, he's robust. I think a lot of people are seeing now we could use him for whatever it's for a cause, whether it's for a spokesman.
What sort of causes, though, are you
mass incarceration? Mass incarceration.
The panelists we see here on the right side of the screen, they are sitting down. Let's listen in. I think we've got a decision.
Okay, I call this parole hearing on Orenthal James Simpson back into order. Are we ready to vote, folks?
Chairman Bisbee, I'll start off. Mr. Simpson, you organized this crime in which 2 victims were robbed at gunpoint. It was a serious crime, and there was no excuse for it. You deserve to be sent to prison. You've been in prison now almost 9 years, the minimum amount imposed by the court. You have complied with the rules of the prison. You have programmed in an acceptable manner. You have no prior conviction of criminal activity. You are low risk to reoffend on our guidelines. You have community support and stable release plans. We've heard from you and from your victim. The question here, as with all parole hearings, is whether or not you have served enough time in prison on this case. Considering all of these factors, my vote is to grant your parole effective when eligible.
Thank you.
And I concur with Commissioner Korda and grant parole. And in addition, our decision, although difficult, is fair and just. Mr. Rendell.
I concur with Commissioner Korda and agree to grant parole.
Mr. Simpson, before I cast my vote, I want to let you know that we believe that we're a fair board. We believe that we're a consistent board. I will let you know that that consistency also goes to parole. And we do not look kindly upon parole violations. And if I cast my vote to grant and it concludes the hearing, our expectation would be that you not violate even the simplest condition of parole. Having said that, I am prepared to cast a vote. I am prepared to ask the commissioners to set conditions. If that happens, we will produce an order sometime in the next 15 to 20 minutes that will be faxed to you or presented to you at the institution, and it will become a public record. So based on all of that, Mr. Simpson, I do vote to grant parole when eligible, and that will conclude this hearing.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll see you guys.
Good job.
You're holding up good too, man. All these years.
And there you have it. 70-year-old O.J. Simpson granted parole there in Nevada in that robbery case for which he has spent the better part of the last 9 years of his life. Simpson will return to his prison cell for now. We are told October 1 is the earliest that he will walk out of that prison a free man. Lovelock, Nevada, that is where Katie Beck is also standing by. She is there at the prison. Katie, what happens now?
Well, obviously, a lot of relief from O.J. Simpson there. You could see his reaction as he clenched his heart leaving the room there with his supporters. I think the only other emotion we saw from him that was that strong was when the victim of that robbery, Bruce Fromong, actually told him during this hearing, you're my friend, I forgive you, and if you call me and need a ride when you're released, I'll come pick you up. At that moment, we also saw O.J. Simpson shed a few tears. There has to be a great sense of relief. Those commissioners felt that his disciplinary record while in prison was clean. He did everything that he was supposed to do. As he said in his own testimony today, he said he tried to abide by the rules. He tried to be a model inmate. He tried to do everything that they asked of him because he didn't want to add any time to the time he had already served. As we said, the sorry came very late in the hearing, the I'm sorry, but he did express regret, saying he wished this never would have happened, that he used bad judgment, and if he could do it again, he would have made another choice. So this was the outcome that the Simpson supporters in that room were hoping for, a unanimous decision from all four commissioners to go ahead and grant parole. October 1st is the first eligible date that he could be released. That doesn't necessarily mean that will be the date that he will be released. That will be determined down the road. Craig.
All right, Katie Beck there for us in Lovelock. Katie, thank you. John Q. Kelly is still with us, lead attorney for the estate of Nicole Brown Simpson. Your reaction, first of all?
Not surprised, always disappointed. I want to be very clear. I've represented Nicole's estate. I've always been Nicole's voice. Looking at things through her eyes, representing her, knowing what I know. I think he never should have seen the light of day. I think between 95 and 2007 was a gift to him, and I think freedom now is a gift to him too. But that being said, I don't agree with what happened, but I don't criticize. They had their format, they had their formula, and it was certainly anticipated.
John, again, it should be noted that here's a man that, as a result of that civil judgment, owes the estate the better part of $30–40 million. Do you want to see O.J. Simpson out there selling himself once again, making some money, so that the estate can get some of that money?
No. I think it'd be best that for, as I said, once again, looking at this, I think Nicole would, through her eyes, disappear into the night, let his children have some peace also. I don't think he's got any money-making ability anyway. You didn't see it between 95 and 2007, and I certainly don't think you're going to see it now. So, but that being said, as I said, I'll always have that one lens I look through, and it is what it is.
Ari, we also heard from the head of that panel the possibility of some sort of conditions, and these conditions could be faxed over to Simpson later in the afternoon. What kinds of conditions might she be talking about?
Typically, there are conditions on where the individual can reside, their movement, whether they can leave the state, and how they get clearance for that in advance, and their behavior. There was many references to alcohol, for example. When you look at O.J. Simpson, this story that has captivated the country and opinions of the legal system for a long time, there has been so much that has been unusual, atypical, marred by celebrity, money, and other issues. I think a big point here, what we observed just now, is a proceeding that was normal, that was typical. This is perhaps a final chapter of the O.J. saga, and it's one where we're seeing a reversion to the mean and to the normal course. It would have been highly unusual for this parole board to do anything other than what we just observed, which was to process this, to hear from the defendant, to look at the point system, to hear from anyone else relevant, in this case a victim, and to come back and return a verdict, in this case a ruling based on those points. That's what they did. Normal, normal, normal. And these calls, and we heard some, I think, somewhat newsworthy on your air here, Craig, from a former prosecutor suggesting that the law should not govern, that an acquittal or that conduct accused and not found guilty in the justice system, whether you agree or not, should somehow been entered into here. A rather remarkable statement made on MSNBC by Christopher Darden, who obviously brings his passions, and we all are free to share them.
And his bias.
I'm just calling it passion because I know he cares deeply, and I know that no, in all seriousness, I know that he prosecuted a double homicide, and those lives are lost. I get it, but anytime, I don't care what the reason, anytime someone says we shouldn't apply the law anymore to someone, we should do something else, we should all be wary of that. And so the system worked today.
Well, we should reset here, top of the hour, 3 o'clock on the East Coast. It is noon in Lovelock, Nevada. You are looking at a relieved and thankful O.J. Simpson. He has just been granted parole by the parole board there, a unanimous decision. Simpson has spent the better part of the last 9 years in prison for a 2008 robbery, a robbery in which he and 5 others walked into a hotel room in Las Vegas, and in Simpson's own words, took back his own stuff, took back memorabilia that he thought was his. So October 1st, we're told, is the first date. That's the earliest date that O.J. Simpson will once again walk out of prison a free man. Katie Fang, MSNBC legal analyst, standing by. I saw you nodding disapprovingly at something Ari Melber was saying. That's actually highly usual. That's not terribly unusual here. People disagree.
Caveat is, all hail to the chief legal correspondent, Ari Melber, with all respect. Ari was emphasizing how normal this process was.
Yeah.
But what's not normal is O.J. Simpson. Because in the court of public opinion, he is guilty as charged. Even if a California jury walked him, and I want to note that ESPN documentary that O.J. made in America, we heard members of that jury say that acquittal was retribution for the Rodney King acquittals. So think about what that public's going to be like now that O.J.'s back on the street, because that man is going to be a moving target. And those parole conditions are going to include not violating the law. It may be something as minor as alcohol consumption to excess, or it could be something like a fraud deal gone wrong. Who knows? But they're going to be watching him carefully, and that's why O.J. can't can't be normal no matter how hard he tries.
Bill Roden, one of the things that Ori did not mention that a lot of this was about back in the 90s was race. And one could argue for a lot of folks it's still very much about that. Do you get the sense that too has shifted? In the mid-90s, there are a lot of folks that looked like me and you who thought, OJ didn't do it. This was a grand conspiracy. It was Mark Furman. It was. Do you get the sense that over the 25 years that has passed since he was acquitted for the double murder, that the sentiment in Black America has changed as it relates to O.J. Simpson's guilt or innocence?
Well, first of all, no, and obviously, whenever we get those questions, that I'm speaking for me.
Right.
You know, I mean, I'm speaking
not
for
Bill
me.
Roden, who works for ESPN.
Well, not only that, not for Black America.
Gotcha.
I mean, that's a pretty large territory, maybe for me and you at this moment. But the answer is no. I think that the issue is not race, it's racism, and I think racism has intensified, and particularly remember when he went in. Even Obama was just becoming the president, and the nation was, you know, kind of over. Now we're in a different climate. We're in a different climate. I think that the battle lines have even become even more intensified. So no, I think that, and I was one of those people that when he was acquitted, I feel terrible for the loss of life. I mean, I feel awful about the loss of life. Nicole and Gold, I feel awful about that. There was a part of me that said, you know, this justice system is just so terribly corrupt and has ruined so many lives of young Black men and women that it needs to be so, yes. But today, in answer to your question, no, I think that the racism that we kind of railed against then is still existed now. And how do I feel about O.J.? Yeah, I'm glad that a person is free, that a person is free, and I think it was a fair. Here, I think it was justified. He's paid 9 years. Is a long, and 9 years in prison is a long time.
And on the numbers, because you make an important point, Craig. Look, we have the numbers. NBC News, Carrie Dan pulled them. When polled in 1995, 23% of respondents believed he was innocent. When polled last year, revisiting the question, 7% of respondents believed he was innocent. So while the racial divide was clear at the time, I think that shifted. One other point, do we have time?
Yeah, yes.
One other point. The trial, as we know, back when it first occurred on the double homicide, positioned it as asking people to choose between whether there was systemic racism within the LAPD or whether O.J. Simpson was guilty. And that's how it was framed. That was, by the way, an expert litigation strategy by the so-called Dream Team. And that's how it ultimately played out, as we know, from interviews with the jurors and ultimately with a racial divide that this country continues to explore. The situation, though, as we know, is there can be evidence of institutional racism in a police department and evidence of guilt in a prosecution. So when you widen the lens beyond, I mean, the consent decrees we've seen in cities like Los Angeles, Chicago, Baltimore show statistical, systemic mistreatment and disparate treatment of African Americans. That can be true regardless of your views of the guilt or innocence of the man we see on the screen.
NBC News senior investigative and legal correspondent Cynthia McFadden is rejoining the conversation. Cynthia, we saw you nodding as well.
Well, you know, I had a chance to look at a poll conducted by Gallup last year, and they actually broke out white voters and Black voters to get their opinions about whether or not O.J. Simpson was guilty. At the time of the verdict in 1995, 20% of those polls said that they did not, that they believed he was guilty. 20% of the African-American people polled. Now it is over 50%. So I think your intuitive sense that maybe things have shifted, at least in the public, not about whether or not there's still racism. I mean, that's a different question. But whether or not O.J. Simpson did it, apparently the public sees things differently.
For those of you who might just be joining us, this was the scene inside this parole hearing just a few moments ago as O.J. Simpson learned that he would be walking out of Lovelock Prison a free man. Take a listen.
I do vote to grant parole when eligible, and that will conclude this hearing.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll see you guys. See you later.
Judge.